I don't know if you want to do a thing. David, do you need more air?
No, I'm okay.
Oh.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, you can be seated. Okay. Just waiting for him to get his device back on and make sure it works before we proceed. Get a good shot of Mr. Melks there. I think that's his good side. No, is that your good side, Mr. Melks?
No.
Can you hear us, sir?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Broderick, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, during this trial, you're going to hear testimony about a frightening encounter, specifically one individual threatening to hit other individuals with their vehicle. This case, which is the assault of Mr. William Rayborn and April Rayborn, is a consequence of that frightening encounter. On June 4th, 2023, at 1115 White Street, which is here in the city of Lansing, Ingham County, the defendant, Mr. Jesse Cockrum, would commit an assault on Mr. William Rayborn and Miss April Rayborn, committing the assault with his vehicle. And as a result of that assault, on June 4th, 2023, he's charged here today with the crime of assault or assault and battery. As the prosecutor, as has been said a couple of times, I have the burden of proof here, and I must present evidence that a crime was committed and to who committed that crime, specifically the defendant, Mr. Cockrum. Additionally, you'll be instructed here, as you've already sort of been, that crimes are made up of elements. During this trial, I want you to use those elements for this crime as sort of a checklist and make sure that I have hit every one of those. And briefly, I will just outline those again for the crime of assault. Crime of assault has three elements. First, that the defendant either attempted to commit a battery or did an act that would cause a reasonable person to fear an immediate battery. Second, that the defendant intended to commit that battery or made the individuals fear an immediate battery. And third, that at the time the defendant had the ability or appeared to have the ability to commit that battery. At the conclusion of this trial, I'll speak to you again, and I will explain how the evidence that's been presented here relates to the elements of the charge. And based on that anticipated evidence, I will submit to you that the defendant, Mr. Jesse Cockrum, is guilty of the charge of assault or assault and battery. So members of the jury, the evidence that I anticipate you will hear in this case is testimony, which is the assault of Mr. William Rayborn and April Rayborn. It's specifically that, and on June 4th, 2023, Mr. William Rayborn and Miss April Rayborn were at 1115 White Street when Mr. Cockrum pulled into the driveway in his vehicle and an argument began between him and Mr. Rayborn. After this argument had allegedly concluded, Mr. Cockrum then backed his car out of the driveway, pulled forward a short bit, and then drove his vehicle backwards at Mr. Rayborn and Miss Rayborn, causing them to fear being hit. During this trial, I anticipate you'll hear from Mr. William Rayborn, Miss April Rayborn, and Miss Kimberly Martin. What I anticipate you'll learn from this is that this assault began as a result of Mr. Cockrum coming to the home that Mr. William Rayborn and Ms. April Rayborn were at, causing the argument to take place, leading to him driving his vehicle at the two individuals. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this trial, I would ask you to hold the defendant accountable for his actions for the assault of Mr. William Rayborn and Ms. April Rayborn. And based on the evidence here, I'll ask you to find the defendant guilty of the crime of assault. Thank you.
Mr. Mills.
Cockrum pulls into a driveway. He has an argument with William. At the conclusion of that argument, he backs out of the driveway to the point where he's diagonal compared to the driveway. Pulls forward, back about a foot. Continues yelling at William, who's back over here, and then drives away. That is the essence of what this assault is. There's obviously a lot more to it, but that is the essence of what this assault is. We got to meet earlier. Again, my name is Stephen Mills, and I get to represent Mr. Cockrum here. And in this situation, it's important to introduce all the characters. Now, there are several people with the same last name, the Rayborns. So you're going to hear about William, you're going to hear about April, and then you're going to hear about Kim. These are the three individuals who are at the house that Mr. Cockrum drives to. You're also going to hear about Mr. Cockrum, obviously, and you're going to hear about his wife, Felicia. I'm sorry, his girlfriend, Felicia. See, the day started off with just the two of them. They were in an argument, Felicia and my client. Felicia has some troubles with substance abuse, with alcohol, and she's on probation. She's been drinking. Said Mr. Cockrum. Also has a daughter. I love the daughter. Lived, or at least that day was with Felicia. Even though there was this argument going on at home between Felicia and my client walked away for a little while, came back and found that Kyla was gone. So was Felicia. Felicia had been drinking with her 11-year-old daughter, and you're going to hear from Felicia today. My client was concerned. He didn't know where she went, either Felicia or Kyla. But he knows that William is the father of Kyla. William, whose house he drove to. William and Felicia are exes. This is where the family comes in together. William, Kim, and April, they're all related, brother, sisters. Felicia is the ex-wife of William, Kayla being the daughter. My client does not have William's phone number. Mr. Cockrum did the next best thing by going out and looking for Kyla. Go to William's house. Tried to explain to him, look, here's what's going on. Here are my concerns. William did not want anything to do with my client and initiated this argument between the two of them. Things got heated, as things can often do when there's family involved. Into a driveway, an argument. He backed out of the driveway, turned slightly, drove forward, stopped. William was back here, moved a foot or two back. They continued yelling, and my client left. You'll hear testimony that neither William nor Kim left the grassy area on their property. And my client did not go into the grassy area on their property. They were not in danger. However, there were a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, and sometimes what this can turn into is confirmation bias, where we've got some angry family members who are believing the story that they want to believe. Confirmation bias is just when we interpret the facts that support a desired conclusion. Because in this situation, you will find my client did the right thing that day, trying to warn William and the family, backed out of the driveway, pulled forward, back a little bit, and then drove away. We anticipate that during the trial, that you'll be given some photos of the scene in order to help you out. What is Defense Exhibit C here is exactly what the driveway will be. And you will hear that he backed out, turned, drove forward, block the street, there's a car there, stopped a little bit, and then took off. This is the area that you will see, and we will reference. Talk about what you won't see today too. You won't see anything regarding evidence, no physical evidence. You won't see any injuries. You won't even see police officers here today. And the question that everyone here has to make a decision on is, has the prosecutor proven this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Has the prosecutor presented evidence to you where you are convinced beyond a single reasonable doubt that my client had the intent to cause a battery or had the intent to put someone in fear and that he actually did that thing? It's also important to remember that this is the people versus Jesse Cochrum. This isn't William versus Jesse Cochrum. This isn't April. This isn't Kim versus Jesse Cockrum. This is state saying, look, whether or not you committed a crime, they have other avenues that they can go down in order to try to find some sort of redemption in this situation, whether that be financially for any injuries that they suffered or didn't suffer in that matter. But again, it's whether the state can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. You are the fact finders here. That is your role, and it is a very important role. As everyone here knows, you are deciding today what happens to my client. His liberty is on the line, and that's why we have this proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the absolute highest burden that we can afford an individual in this country. And this is very important. Even if you come down and say, yeah, maybe he's guilty, maybe he did something, that is not enough if you still have a reasonable doubt. And it's an important thing to remember as you're analyzing the facts, as you're analyzing the case in the situation, as to whether or not the prosecutor can prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt. Not myself, not Mr. Cochrum. Whether the prosecutor has upheld his burden today. I'm hopeful in this situation that you will see that at the end of the conclusion of this trial, that my client will be found not guilty. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
You can call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People would call Mr. William Rayborn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Can have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a microphone that's in front of you, and the lady behind you is my court recorder. She has to take down everything that's stated here, so your responses must be loud and they must be clear. They must be verbal. We can't do head nods or shakes and nods. You understand that?
I do.
Okay. Lastly, if there's a objection from either of the attorneys, you would hold that response. I'm going to make a ruling on that objection, and then I will tell you if you can give that response or not, okay?
Thank you.
State your first name, then state your last name, spell both of them.
First name is William, last name is Rayborn, First name spelled William. Last name spelled Raborn.
You can proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Rayborn.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Rayborn, do you know an individual by the name of Jesse Cockrum?
I do.
Okay, and how do you know Mr. Cockrum?
He is my ex-wife's boyfriend.
Okay, and do you see Mr. Cockrum here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please indicate where he's sitting in an article of clothing he's wearing?
He is wearing a sweater with glasses and he's sitting next to his attorney over there.
Okay,
Just off to
please,
the left of him.
thank you. Please let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Any objection?
No objection, thank you.
Identification is noted.
So, Mr. Rayborn, I want to take you back to June 4th, 2023. Do you remember that date?
I do.
Okay, and did you encounter Mr. Cockrum on that date?
We did.
Okay, and where did that encounter take place?
That encounter excuse me. That encounter took place at my residence.
Okay, and what's the address of where that took place?
1115 White Street. White Street spelled Wyte.
Okay, and is that location in the city of Lansing,
It is.
in Ingham County?
Yes.
Okay, and so how did this encounter with Mr. Cockrum begin that day?
The encounter began with my daughter calling me because her mother and her boyfriend were having an argument, is what she said to me. She was scared and wanted me to come pick her up.
Okay, and so what did you do after you got that?
I went, what any father would do, and go to his kid's rescue. I went and picked my daughter up.
Okay, and where did you go with your daughter after you picked her up?
After I picked my daughter up, we came back to my residence, 1115 White Street.
Okay, and how long were you there before
10 minutes.
Mr. Cockrum?
Jesse Cochran showed up at my house 10 minutes after I got home.
Okay, and how did you know it was Mr. Cockrum?
My daughter said that it was him. My daughter Kyla said
Okay.
Jesse's here.
And so what did you do when you heard he was at your house?
Went up to talk to him and see what he was there for.
Okay, and was he still was he outside of his vehicle? Was he
He
inside?
was
of
sitting
it?
in the driver's side of his vehicle.
Okay, and what type of vehicle was this?
It was a blue sports car, like a Corvette or something. I don't necessarily know what type of vehicle that was. I could definitely identify it if I was looking at it in person.
Okay. So what happened after you walked outside?
Jesse began to speak to me, asking me about Kyla.
Okay, and what happened after that?
So Jesse spoke to me, asking me about Kyla and informing me that Kyla had been picked up by my ex-wife, her mother, Felicia, which she was out driving around with her and her friends somewhere. His exact words were,
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Sorry.
The statement that you're going to give is the defendant's statement?
this is what his words were.
I'm sorry, I misheard that, Your Honor. I apologize.
Okay,
What's wrong?
objections overruled.
His words in his front seat of his car were, she's out riding around with Felicia with a bunch of drug addicts, was exactly what his word.
Okay. And let me back up a little bit. So when you're having this discussion with Mr. Cockrum, was he in his vehicle the whole time or did he ever get out of his
He
vehicle?
was in his vehicle, yes.
Okay. And how far were you from his vehicle while this was happening?
About 8 feet back,
Okay.
roughly.
So what happens at this point in the
Mr.
argument?
Cochran then decided to speak to me more about my daughter. What I mentioned to him was my daughter was my business and not his. And then he began to speak to me about Felicia, my ex-wife. What I mentioned to him was my ex-wife's business was not my business, as we were separated for the last 2 years. Mr. Cochran then said, excuse my explicit language. May I please speak freely?
Yes.
Don't get your dick all puffed up.
And then what happened at that point?
Mr. Cochrum then said, after he said, don't let your dick off out there, he did say that he was there as a friend to speak of, make sure my daughter was fine, and to speak of Felicia's whereabouts. I told him, basically, don't worry about anything. He got upset then, told me he would kick my ass. I said, if he wanted to, he could step out of the car and test his luck if he wanted to. I then asked him to leave. Mr. Cochrum then spat on me.
Okay,
I asked him to leave again.
okay, and so at this point, in the altercation, how, is he still in his vehicle?
He was still in his vehicle,
Okay, and where were you, how far were you from the vehicle? at this
about
point?
8 feet still.
Okay.
I did not take steps forward, nor did I take steps back.
Okay, so after that happens, what happens after that?
He was asked to leave plenty of times from my property. He was asked to leave plenty of times. He was asked by myself and other witnesses to leave the premises plenty of times.
Okay, and how long, in your estimate, how long did this altercation last between you and Mr. Cockrum?
From beginning to end,
Yes, from the time he pulled into your driveway until the end of the incident.
that seemed like forever. Everything seemed like forever when you're going through it. Or lasting long. I would say a rough estimate of about 10 to 15 minutes long from start to begin. Actually, start to end.
Okay, and so did Mr. Cockrum eventually leave your property?
He did.
Okay, and what happened when he left?
Mr. Cochran then, he backed up with his rear end facing west, pulled forward, started to leave, going east, stopped, skirted his tires, and proceeded to back into my driveway, into my yard, attempting to hit myself and myself.
Okay. Okay, so when you say he attempted to, just for a little clarity, when you say he attempted to hit you, can you explain what
Mr.
you mean by
Cochran
that?
he squealed his tires from the road, backing up into the driveway, into the yard, and tried to hit me with his car while backing.
Okay. And when Mr. Cockrum drove his vehicle at you, what did you do at that point?
I was pulled all the way in front of my sister.
Okay. And when he was driving his vehicle backwards at you, what were you thinking at that time?
I'm about to get hit by this person. Like, why is this person at my house? Why did this person even come here? What point did this person need to be at my premises? My daughter was not his, I'm sorry. My daughter was not his business, nor is his business on that day in question. Why did this person even come to my premises to do what?
Okay. And so what happened after, I should say,
I went
did
to
Mi-
my,
sorry, let
Objection.
me, yeah, let me rephrase.
What's the objection?
Draw, never mind.
Okay, thank you.
Did Mr. Cockrum ever hit you with his vehicle?
attempted to. I was
But did-
pulled out of the way. No, he did not hit me with a
Okay.
vehicle. I was pulled out of the way, so I did not get hit,
Okay.
no.
And what happened at that point?
I went to my porch. He was asked to leave continuously.
Okay, and did he leave at that point?
Excuse me. He sat in his vehicle staring through his mirror like a dead stare, like you were lucky I didn't hit you. Just a dead stare.
Okay. And you mentioned your sister was there with you at that time. What's her name?
Both of my sisters.
Both
were
of your,
at the-
so,
at the
okay, so both
premises,
of your
yes.
sisters there. What are their names?
My sister April,
Okay,
last name Rayborn. My sister Kimberly, last name Martin.
and did you contact the police at this time?
My sister Kimberly called the police.
Okay,
She was actually on the phone with the police while he was sitting in our yard in his car with his dead stare.
so, Mr. Rayborn, I'm going to show you what has been stipulated to and admitted as Defendant's Exhibit A. If you could just take a look at it for a minute. Permission to approach, sir.
You may.
Do you recognize that photograph?
It was from the police.
Okay, but do you recognize the location in that photograph?
That is 1115 White Street, yes.
Okay, and so if you could, and again, permission to approach here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna hand you my pen here. If you could you mark roughly on the picture just an X of where you were standing during this altercation? Doesn't work. They need to-
Got it, right in the yard here.
Okay. Permission to approach here.
Okay.
And then permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor.
Yes.
Where to put it at. So if you just want to point it to- Okay. And that place, you just marked with the X, that's where you were standing during this whole altercation.
Correct.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, I'm going to show you two photos that have been pre-marked as defendants exhibit B and C. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Sir, I'm going to hold these two right in front of you here. We'll start with B. B, yes, sir. Is this correct? Yeah, the bottom here, they're
Oh, got
Better.
it, thank you.
in B. Do you recognize that house?
1115 White Street.
So that's your house, and that's an accurate depiction of what happened that day?
There's an accurate picture of what the house looks like.
Okay. Is that, do you see yourself or anyone else on the front porch there?
I see a police officer and somebody else.
Okay. But that is the location where we're talking about in this incident, right?
That is correct.
Same thing with C. Sir, is that the location where the incident had occurred?
This is the location where the incident occurred.
Okay. I can have both of that, sir. Thank you. Sir, a day or two ago, you texted Felicia in this matter, telling her that lying is perjury. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And Felicia is my witness in this matter. Is that right?
Felicia was nowhere around the area. Of
You knew she was
anything that
testifying today, though, right?
happened. Did not know that.
Okay.
Not
But you
until-
called her up and said that, or I'm sorry, you texted her that lying under oath is perjury?
I did know just recently.
Oh, okay.
Not today, as of the last few days, yes.
You didn't text her. This case was previously
When I found
adjourned.
out she was a witness, I asked her about it. I did ask my ex-wife about it and asked her why she was a witness. She was nowhere as to where the incident.
Okay. You still felt the need to call her, is what I'm getting at. Is that right?
We have a daughter together. We speak on a daily basis, yes.
All right, approach the jury.
Yes.
So what's been marked as defense exhibit A, you put an X on the location here, is that correct?
Where I was standing at throughout the whole incident.
You were standing there through the entire incident, is that right?
In the front yard, yes.
In the front yard. There's also this sidewalk here, is that right?
There's a sidewalk there, yes.
And that's just below where you marked the X, right?
There's a sidewalk there, yes.
And you didn't move from that location the entire time?
I was in the front yard, yes.
Okay. And while you were talking to my client when he pulled in, who else was with you?
Sister came out.
And let me preface this. Who was right next to you?
It would have been myself with Jesse at first, and then my sister did come out.
Which sister, Kim or April? Now, when Jesse first pulled into the driveway, he came in car nose first, is that right?
That's correct.
And when he drove in, we looked at the sidewalk in the one picture. Did he drive past the sidewalk to park his car?
I believe his back tires were just off the sidewalk, I believe.
All right, so I'm not gonna mark the picture, but what's been marked as defense exhibit C here. We see the sidewalk here, is that correct?
That is correct.
And so his back tire probably would have just been on right there on the sidewalk?
Just roughly around there, maybe just behind it,
Okay, so roughly on the sidewalk back there, back tire.
roughly in the area just behind it.
When he backed up, you kind of indicated that he backed up. He came back and came, if the street's coming out this way, he came over on this side, is that right?
He came out west. That means he came this way of the picture. He went towards.
Was his rear end towards, was his rear end towards the silver car here?
Could you please bring that to me?
Was his rear end towards that silver car there?
The rear end was this way.
So his front of his car was facing this silver
He
car.
backed out this way.
Okay, when he backed out, once he's backing out, was the front end of his car facing towards the silver car?
He backed out like this.
So is that a yes or is that a no?
That is correct. He backed out with his behind end back like this,
Right,
which would have been yes. His front end would have been facing towards that silver car.
Okay.
Yes. He proceeded to leave.
objection non-responsive.
Sorry.
Objection sustained.
Once he backed out, was there still more yelling that he was doing through his window?
I went to it. I don't know. I was walking around the yard. I don't know.
You were walking around the yard? I thought you were in that one spot the
I
whole time.
was
Okay, so you're just walking that spot?
in my yard.
Okay. He then pulled forward, is that right?
He did.
And you're saying that he came and drove what? Drove up on your grass?
So what he did was he proceeded
Did he drive up on your grass?
backwards.
So he pulled forward, he was not on your grass yet, is that fair?
He pulled forward by the car and proceeded to squat his tires and come back at us.
Okay, so you're saying that he drove forward, stopped, and then came back.
Correct.
And you indicated this was like a short distance,
What do you,
like a foot or two he drove backwards?
he backed up like any car would.
Did he drive back a foot or two?
Define a foot or two. What do you mean by that? Because any person, and what I saw was he backed up, pulled back like this, pulled forward by that silver car, and then squawked his tires and came back.
Did he reverse about 24 inches,
Probably more,
30 inches,
probably more.
10 feet?
He backed up where that camera angle was up. He would have backed up out of the camera angle. Right into the front of the house.
And he drove up onto the driveway in reverse?
So what he did was he pulled forward by where that car was at,
Mhm.
stopped, and proceeded to back up into the driveway.
So when he backed up, he drove into the driveway, he drove onto the grass, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You said you received a call from your daughter, is that right?
I did receive a call from the daughter that day.
Now you went and you picked up your daughter, is that right?
That's correct.
And you picked her up at the QD, isn't that true?
That is correct.
And you picked her up because she was with her mother Felicia, right?
That was correct.
But Felicia was not driving her car, was she?
Her friend Aaron was driving her
Her
car.
friend Aaron was driving the car.
Because
Her friend Aaron was driving the car,
that's
correct?
correct.
Felicia had been drinking that day, is that right?
That is correct.
And you knew that as well?
I did not know that until I saw her or met up with her.
Is that concerning to you
That Felicia has an
Was-
alcohol problem? Yes.
that she was drinking that day?
Felicia's business is not my business, what she does.
But she was with your daughter, is that right?
That is correct.
And your daughter is your business, right?
That's completely
And she
correct.
was with,
Yeah, she was
Felicia,
not-
is that
not-
correct?
Not driving, that's correct.
okay. You indicated that on your drive back, you had Kayla, is that right?
Kyla,
You had
please.
Kyla with you and you drove back from QD, correct?
That's correct.
And you drove back to your house, is that right?
That's correct.
And you called your sister, is that also true?
Did I call my sister?
You called April on the way back, is that right?
I probably did, yes.
You
Told
remember
her
telling her cooler heads will prevail?
I mean, when you stay cool. head keep
Do you
prevail.
recall saying that or no?
I don't necessarily recall saying that, no, but whoever has typically do prevail in any situation.
Okay,
That's a accurate.
you don't
statement.
remember saying that to her though, right?
I do remember talking to my sister, I don't necessarily remember
Do you
saying.
remember
that.
being upset while talking to your sister?
Who would not be upset? And what father would not be upset of having to go per se pick their daughter up to make sure that they were safe? From a.
Objection, non-responsive.
Okay, so sir, you can only answer the questions that are asked. So if the question as posed is a yes or no answer, your response can be yes, no, or I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank you, Your
thank
Honor.
you. Objection sustained.
You got back to your house, correct?
Correct.
And you said about 10 minutes later, my client Jesse, he pulls up, right?
You did,
And he pulls into the driveway, correct?
correct.
And at this point, he was telling you about his concerns with Felicia, is that right?
He mentioned his concerns with my daughter first.
Okay, so he mentioned the concerns regarding
He said that.
your
she
daughter,
was-
is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and then he also said that he had some concerns about Felicia, is that correct?
he did.
And these are the same concerns that you yourself on the stand just said you had concerns about, is that right?
I do have concerns.
Okay. You said that Jesse pulled up in a possibly like a blue Corvette.
He pulled up in one of his vehicles, yes.
Okay, was it actually a black Camaro?
Could have been, yes.
Is it hard to remember?
I can point the car out if you'd like me to, for sure.
But you don't recall what it is.
It's not necessarily what
Okay.
vehicle. Oh, if I may speak,
Yeah, I know.
There's no question.
I'm sorry.
Did Jesse ask where Kyla was?
He said that she was riding along with her mother.
And did you had to tell him that Kyla was in your house, right?
I did mention that.
And then, to your knowledge, did he have any reason to know that?
Kyla was picked up from 919 Dornell, where Jesse was at before,
So you telling him that Kyla was at your house is the first time he heard that.
as far as I am to
Alright.
believe.
Again, you were saying time and again that you and Felicia were divorced and that's not your business, is that right?
Who or what?
Your business, my client talking about Felicia,
Correct.
that was not your business, is that right?
Exactly what I mentioned. to you.
In fact, you said that was not your concern, is that correct?
She technically would not be my concern as to what she does with her.
The only person who's your concern was Kyla and Kyla's safety, is that right?
That's correct.
You indicated that you had to be pulled out of the way when Jesse backed his car into your lawn, is that right?
That's correct.
And so he would have pulled all the way back 8 feet into your lawn, is that right?
He pulled a far away back. Yes.
And then he peeled out when he left?
No,
So he just left?
he just left. He peeled in when he came in, squirted his fire. He came in. He did not peel out leaving. No, he left it regular.
So at this point, you said he backed all the way in about 8 feet to where you were, is that right?
That's correct.
Then he left, driving forward, is that right?
That's correct.
When he backed in, was there still an argument going on between the two of you?
No,
There weren't any words that were said or anything?
no,
When he left, did you chase him?
no,
Did you run into the street?
no.
Well, that's because you stayed in your spot roughly, right?
In my grass, yes.
When he was leaving, did he say anything as he was leaving?
And I hear him.
You're laughing?
Was I laughing?
Did you hear laughing?
Not necessarily. Didn't hear really much.
You don't particularly care for my client, do you?
I don't have a problem with Jesse.
Don't have a problem with Jesse?
No, I do not.
Your Honor, I've got no further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury? May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and there is a sequestration order, so you're not to speak about any portions of your testimony with any other witnesses, okay, sir?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, you may be excused.
Thank you.
You can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people would call Miss April Rayborn.
Right here, if you can raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, ma'am.
Think you can have a seat, ma'am? You a little nervous?
I'm very nervous. I've never been through anything like this.
Well, just breathe. Do you need any water?
Yeah.
Is there water?
Let me go.
There's that. Okay, there's a microphone that's in front of you and the person behind you is the court reporter, so she has to take down everything being stated here today. So we need your responses to be loud and clear. And then you can't do head nods or shakes because we can't write that into the record, okay?
Yes.
Very good. Otherwise, you'll just hear us say, is that a yes or is that a no? If there is an objection, you stop answering. I'll make a ruling on the objection, then I'll tell you if you could give that answer or not, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you state your first and last name and then spell both of them?
April Rayborn, APRILRABORN.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Rayborn. Ms. Rayborn, I want to take you back. Do you remember the date of June 4th, 2023?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And where were you on that date?
It was at my home, 1115 White Street.
Okay. And is that located in the city of Lansing,
Yes, good.
in Ingham County?
Yes.
And why were you there that day?
I reside there.
Okay. Were there other family members there that day?
Oh, yes, yeah. We have every Sunday we have a family gathering.
Okay. And do you know an individual by the name of Jesse Cockrum?
I know of him. I
Okay.
don't personally know him.
Okay, fair enough. Have you ever seen Mr. Cockrum before?
I have seen him of the day of June 4th.
Okay. Do you see him anywhere here in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Can you please indicate where he is sitting in an article of clothing he's wearing?
He is sitting two chairs next to yours in a white sweater, cream colored sweater.
Please let the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant.
Any objection?
No objections.
So noted.
So you kind of said, but did you have an encounter with Mr. Cockrum on June 4th, 2023?
Yes,
Okay, and how did that begin?
I was in the backyard of 115 White Street House with family. Somebody had pulled into the driveway, and we thought it was from my sister. She is a manager, and we thought it was someone dropping off keys. Somebody was coming to drop off store keys to her. And she went out. She went outside first to figure out who it was. Then I was called outside.
And why were you called outside?
I was called outside because my brother was outside, because it was not who we thought it was. It was not for him.
And who was out there?
There was a vehicle out there. Well, So I did not know who it was out there until I was called out to the front.
Okay.
And it did happen to be, my niece had said, no, that's Jesse. That's what I remember.
And what's your niece's name?
Kyla
Kyla.
Rayborn, my
Okay.
brother's daughter,
Okay, and your brother is,
William Rayborn.
okay, just so we can keep everybody clear. Do you recall what type of vehicle was out there in the driveway?
Mhm.
What was it?
Challenger,
And,
Dodge,
okay, and what color was it?
dark color.
Okay,
I can't,
and so when you walk outside, what do you see happening when you walk outside?
when I walked out the front door, my brother was standing on the sidewalk in between. There's like a sidewalk, and then there's a lawn, and there's a lawn. I don't know how else to describe it. So the sidewalk in the front lawn. And then Jesse was inside of his car, and that's when I seen I walked outside.
Okay, and what were they doing?
They were talking.
Okay, and how would you describe?
My brother was asking Jesse to leave, and Jesse just wanted to inform my brother about Felicia. I just remember him saying something about Felicia, which is my brother's ex-wife.
Okay, and how would you describe their tone of voice at this time?
William was being very firm about him leaving. Jesse was being very adamant about informing William about Felicia.
And from the best of your recollection, from the time you got outside to what, or let me back up for a second. Did Mr. Cockrum eventually leave the driveway?
Yeah,
Okay, and so just from when you walked outside to when he left the driveway, how long, based on your recollection, would you say that lasted?
by maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. And do you recall, I mean, I guess, how far were you from this when it was happening?
When I came outside, I was on the porch, and then I made my way down. I basically just wanted to see what was going on, why I didn't call out front, like kind of stay out of everybody's business. And then when I noticed that William was asking him to leave, and he just kind of was just kept on saying, you know, talking about Felicia and whatever situation was going on. I know that my brother, prior to all this, got a call from his daughter and was going to pick her up because she was scared of what was going on at the house.
Okay.
So I do know that there was some things going on before all this had happened. But then I had walked down the stairs, and then I had myself had asked him, "You need to leave." He just kind of dead stared at me. The look on his face was, "Well, who are you?" You know, like, I guess I would probably look like that too. Never seen him before. He's never met me before. And then I asked him again if he would leave, and then he spit at my brother and pulled out of the driveway. There was words I don't really, and it's been a few months, I don't really remember what was really said, but then he did eventually leave.
Okay, fair enough. So you said he eventually pulled out of the driveway. What happened when he pulled out of the driveway?
He pulled out, and then he reversed back in pretty fast. Scared us all. I grabbed my brother, we moved to the side, then like dead stared at me like, I don't know, I felt very uncomfortable. It looked me right in my eyes in the rearview mirror, and yeah.
And now when you say he backed up, was he, when he began, I guess, backing up, where was he at that time? Like,
so when he pulled out of the driveway, it would be to the west, backing out. where the rear end was facing the west and the front end was facing the east
Okay,
from our driveway. And I thought he was leaving. And he tossed that big old car into reverse, and yeah,
okay.
it's scary, but
And so you said you pulled your brother out of the way, Greg,
Mhm.
and then I'm assuming he stopped at that point?
yeah,
Okay, how far backwards would you say he came when he backed in?
uh. Well, I had to grab my brother, so he came up to, I'd say, the railing of the porch, like if I'm. Here's my brother was standing, like if you walk down our stairs, I don't know if you guys see the front of the house or not. If you walk down the stairs, my brother was standing there, when he backed up. Yeah, his rear end was at the front of the porch.
Okay, and
the railing.
when he stopped his vehicle, about how far from you and where your brother were would you say he stopped?
Right in front of us, like he was right there.
Okay.
He would have hit my brother if I wanted to grab him.
Okay.
He would have
And
got bumped. I should say, well, they were on hold, but he would have got bumped.
okay, and when you saw him throw his vehicle into reverse and come at you and your brother, what were you thinking at that time?
It happened so fast. I just grabbed my brother.
And you may have already said this, but why did you grab your brother?
I didn't want him to get hit.
Okay. And so after Mr. Cockrum drives his vehicle backwards, what happened at that point?
He sat there for, not even a full minute, and just stared at me, and he really like his side mirror. The driver's side.
Okay, and then what happened after that?
Then he took off.
Okay, and when you say he took off, how would you describe how he left, I guess?
Frustrated, pissed.
Well,
I mean,
sorry, let me rephrase that. Did he, in other words, peel out of the driveway? Did he just drive off like normal? How would you describe?
It wasn't normal. It's kind of hard to describe. Those cars got like Hemis or something, to where they, even though they may not sound like they're going, because I don't want, he left not normal.
Okay, fair enough. And so what did you guys do after, or what did you do after you left?
My sister had called the police.
And when you say your sister, who would that be?
Kimberly Martin,
Okay,
the homeowner.
no other questions at this time. No?
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Honor. Sorry, I just one brief moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Okay.
I'm gonna present you with something called Defense Exhibit C, okay?
Mhm.
You recognize this as being the driveway, is that fair to say?
Right.
Now, and you see the street over here on the right side of the page, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, where were you and William standing while Jesse was in the driveway and you guys were all talking?
Just right back here.
You're all the way back here, like right next to the house then?
Right by, this is the railing, so it, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so both of you were right by that railing? Okay. All the way over here, right by that railing. And you remember that police did show up that day, is that right?
Yes, they did, a couple officers.
And do you recall making a statement to one of the officers that someone had to yell to turn around, get out of the way? Do you recall someone yelling that towards you?
Turn around and get out of it to me?
Correct.
No.
Now, if you saw or listened to your statement to police that day, do you think that that would help refresh your memory as to the fact that you said to the police?
That would probably, yeah, help refresh a lot of memory, because it's been a few months.
I'm just gonna go ahead and fast forward this part. Oops. Gonna have you put these on if that's all right. You know when you get those situated, should work. You recognize yourself there? Okay.
Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just gonna go ahead and play this for you. You can stop once you feel that part. Oh, you don't hear anything? Oh. Can you hear that?
I heard that.
Let me take these away from you real quick.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Let me just take these back from you real quick. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Okay. Now, having heard that, you do recall that someone had to yell at you to get your, I think it was like, get your ass out of the way. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Somebody, I don't remember who would have yelled, get out of the way.
Right. But they had to yell, get out of the way. And then you turned around and then you saw the bumper is what you were saying. Is that right?
I don't know why they would yell, get out of the way, like, get out of the way, but
Correct. Well,
yes,
what-
yes, correct.
And then you had
Obviously, I
to,
did
then you
say
turned
that.
around and then you saw the bumper, right?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Only because someone warned you to get out of the way, that's when you realized that Jesse was backing up.
Yeah, yes, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm gonna back up a little bit to when Jesse pulled in. William was there and they were having an argument. Was it a heated argument?
When Jesse pulled in, my sister Kimberly went out because we thought it was someone from her work. But
When you got out there,
when I went out there,
was it a heated argument by the time that you got out there?
it wasn't, my brother really didn't say much when I got out there besides asking him to leave. So I don't know, it was not a heated argument to my knowledge.
Okay, was there yelling back and forth?
Jesse was, I remember Jesse yelling at him about his ex-wife,
Okay.
in whatever situation they had prior to that. And I was just kind of, we were all just wondering how he knew where we lived, honestly. That was the whole thing.
Objection non-responsive at this point.
Objection is sustained.
Sorry. Your Honor. I'm gonna approach again with That's exhibit C. You can see the lawn in that photo, is that right?
Correct,
And you can see the driveway as well, right?
correct.
And is it your testimony that my client squealed his tires while he was backing out? I'm sorry, I know that was a bad question, I apologize. After he'd already backed out of the driveway, and you said that he was coming back towards you, did he squeal his tires when he was coming back onto the lawn?
No, it was just an acceleration.
Just an
A lot of
acceleration, no squealing?
acceleration. I never heard of squeal tire.
Oh. And do you see tire marks in the lawn?
Yeah,
You do? You also testified that it was a big, heavy car, right?
and that is a big car.
Okay. Approach with defense exhibit B. I'm showing you the front of the house, right? As if I'm standing on the street, correct?
Correct.
And do you see the tire marks in that?
No,
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. I've got no further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
No questions, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury?
I guess I have one. I'm not sure of.
If you just write it down if you do. Anyone else have any questions? No. Okay, what time of day was this incident? What time of day did this incident occur?
oh. Anywhere between 12 and 3.
In the afternoon?
Yes, in the afternoon.
Okay, so it was light outside?
Correct, yes.
Oh. Any other questions from the jury? Okay, any redirect or cross based on that question?
Nothing from this evening, Your Honor.
No, thank you, ma'am.
May this witness be excused?
Yes,
Okay, ma'am, there is a sequestration order, so that means you're not allowed to discuss any portions of your testimony with any other witnesses, including your brother. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you may be excused. No problem. And the prosecution can call the next witness.
thank you, Your Honor. The people call Ms. Kimberly Martin.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. You can have a seat, ma'am. Okay, there is a microphone that's right in front of you. Sorry that it's super tight. Yes, it's really bad. And you're not the first person to have this issue there. So it's a microphone that's in front of you, and the person behind you is my court recorder. She has to take down everything being stated here today, okay? So all of your responses need to be verbal responses. You can't just shake your head or nod your head because we can't write that into the record accurately.
Okay.
We need your voices to be loud and clear as well so that we can hear it and it goes over this glass that's right there blocking you out. The other issue is if there is a objection from either of the attorneys, you'll stop responding so I can make a ruling on that objection and then advise you as to whether or not you can give that answer or not, okay?
Okay,
State your first and last name and then spell both of them.
Kimberly Martin, KIMBERLEYMARTIN.
You can proceed, counsel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Martin.
Hello.
So Ms. Martin, I want to take you back to the date of June 4th, 2023. You remember that date?
Yes,
Okay, and where were you on that date?
I was at my home,
And what's the address of that?
1115 White Street, Lansing, Michigan, 49.
Okay, so you kind of just said, but that's located in the city of Lansing,
Yes,
in Ingham County?
yes,
So you stated you remember that date specifically. Why do you remember that date?
because of an incident at my house.
Okay, and when you say there was an incident, what do you mean by that?
There was an altercation between,
Sorry, let me rephrase.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, real quick. I don't, she's speaking loud enough for Journal 7 to hear. I don't,
Can you hear her?
okay,
Okay, can you say that you can hear yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, very good.
thank you. Your Honor.
So let me rephrase that question because that was a bad question. You said that there was an incident or an altercation. What specifically happened?
you know, tell the whole
What,
story.
what did you see? What would, sorry, let me rephrase it again. What part of what happened that day would you describe as the incident that you're referring to?
William and Jesse had words in my front yard. And Jesse started to leave and then he backed up and tried to hit William and my sister as well.
Okay, so we'll back up a little bit to go to the beginning. So how did this whole situation begin?
Well, we have family gatherings in my house on Sunday. We have a big pool and the whole family was there. And William left the gathering. And we got a phone call from his daughter. That her mom and boyfriend were fighting and she didn't feel comfortable or safe. So he left to go get her. And then when he came back, here on the backyard, and a car pulled into the front and we heard it and but we couldn't tell whether he was saying Kim.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, objection at this point. She's testifying just in the narrative.
Objection sustained.
Okay, so we'll back up a little bit. So you said your brother left, he came back. What happened after he came back?
A car pulled up in my driveway
Okay.
and we couldn't hear whether he was saying Kim or Will. So I went out front and then
We'll pause right there. So you went out front. Did you recognize the vehicle that you saw?
no,
Okay. Do you recall what type of vehicle it was?
Charger or
Do you recall what color it was?
um. I want to say it was like silver or something. I don't remember details like that. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Could you see who was driving this vehicle?
I know that was him, but I didn't know him at that time.
Okay, so just my question, could you see who was driving? the vehicle?
Yes,
Okay. And do you see the individual who was driving that vehicle here in the courtroom today?
yes.
Okay, can you please identify where he is sitting in an article of clothing? He's wearing?
Tan sweatshirt. Red glasses.
Please let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Any objection?
None, thank you. Your Honor.
He's noted.
So you see this individual out there in the vehicle, and I believe by your testimony, you said you didn't know who that was, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you do at that time?
I went in front of the house, through the house to the front of the house because of the privacy thing. So I went through the house and Kylo was in the house. And when I got to the front, I didn't know who it was. And then I he said Will. And so then I said, it's for William. And Kyle was like, oh my God, that's Jesse.
And so what happened? What happened after that?
When William went out front, I stayed in the house with Kyle.
And where were you in the house at this time?
I have 2 dining room windows and I was at the one that faces the road, White Street.
Okay. So I'm going to show you what has been marked as Defense Exhibit B, permission to approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Okay. And just, you recognize that as your house, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so could you just point for the jury, just kind of show the jury and point as to which windows you're referring to?
I was in this window.
Okay. And then,
Oh, I'm sorry. I was in this window.
permission to approach. Me.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
just to clarify, was that in the front of the house or is
Yes,
that?
that's the front.
Okay.
It's the front porch, yes.
Thank you. Okay. So you're looking out the front window and what do you observe at that time?
So William starts talking to him. And I'm like, I didn't observe all the, what came between them. I didn't hear that. I could just see like the animosity, if you know what I mean, in their facial expressions. And so that's right.
Okay. And about how long did this argument, the altercation between William and Jesse last?
So about 15-30 seconds into it, I yelled for my sister, April, who was in the backyard still with our family. And then she came through the house. And then it probably lasted like 4 or 5 minutes. During that time, I was on the phone with Felicia.
Okay. What happened when this argument between them ended?
So my house is between New York and Massachusetts. And my sister had told him to leave. My brother had told him to leave. And then when he started to pull out, he pulled out so that he backed towards New York Street and then pulled forward towards Massachusetts and then stopped. And at that point, I had stepped out onto the porch on the phone with Felicia, and then he started backing up, like his tires walked and he backed up into my yard.
All right, if I can stop you right there just for a second. And I'm going to show you what is marked as Defense Exhibit C. And just permission to approach you.
Yes.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that that is the driveway looking down White Street?
Yes.
Okay. And White Street would be the road on the right side of that picture?
That's correct.
Okay. And so there is in that picture, there is a silver vehicle on White Street, correct?
Yep.
So when Mr. Cockrum pulled out, because you were just describing for the jury how he was facing, was he facing the same direction as that silver vehicle, or was his vehicle going the opposite direction of that silver vehicle?
When he pulled out, he was facing towards that vehicle.
Okay. Thank you. Permission to approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So you stated you heard then tires squealing, and then what happened?
So Felicia, I had to hang up and I called the police. And he proceeded to back into my yard where April and William were standing.
And did he, when he backed into the yard, where was he headed, if you could tell?
He was headed towards them.
Okay. And did he ever, and when you saw the vehicle heading towards them, what were you thinking at that time?
I thought he was trying to hit them.
Okay. And did he hit them?
No,
Okay. And when his vehicle came to a stop, how far from your siblings was he?
and my sister grabbed my brother out of the way. If she would not have grabbed him, he would have been hit. So they were within feet.
And then what happened after that?
I was on the phone with 911. And when I was talking to the 911 lady, I was telling her that we had asked him to leave several times, and I told him I'm on the phone with the police. And he literally just, he did not care. He was just, I don't know. It was like he was really angry, but I didn't understand why.
And did he leave at that point?
He did.
Okay.
Yes.
And when, I guess, when he, actually, no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-exam.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm gonna approach with defense exhibit C. Your Honor, if I may approach, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, this is the sort of a profile view of your driveway. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. And you'll see that on the right side of the page, that's the street. Is that right?
That's what, yeah,
And on the left side of the street, when looking at it, that's your house, right?
that's correct.
And where was Jesse standing? I'm sorry, not Jesse. Where was William standing at this time?
Right.
Okay, so he was in the yard. Is that right?
We are.
And let me take this back. Thank you. Okay. And how far? And did he move from that spot?
I don't think so. When he moved, it was when April grabbed him, when they realized what was happening.
Now, I guess I'll just jump to the incident. When you're indicating that Jesse backed up on the lawn, is that right?
Yes,
You're saying that he drove over the sidewalk, is that right?
yes,
Where did his car stop?
like right at the end of my yard.
Right at the end of your yard? I'm gonna approach again, just to help me out,
Yeah.
if that's all right. Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, please.
Where did he stop?
So when he came back and he squawked and then it's come back, probably ended right there.
Okay, so his tire was just past the sidewalk? Because his end would be out a little bit, but his tire was just
Yeah,
over the
his front
sidewalk?
end goes right here, and his back goes right here.
Gotcha, okay. So just so that I'm getting this right, where my pen is right here, is it fair to say that that's where his front tire, or I'm sorry, his rear tire was?
That's correct.
Okay, and then so his rear end would have just been right about here then, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so just so I'm making a clear record here, his rear tire just drove past the sidewalk and stopped, right?
In my yard.
Okay,
Yes.
in your yard, all right. Now, do you recall yelling at April to get out of the way?
I really don't.
Don't?
No.
Do you recall, was that screamed at all that day? Like April move?
I'm not gonna, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't remember, I'm sorry.
And you also can't remember what the car was, right?
I'm not a detail person, I'm not a car person, I just know that it was a muscle car.
Okay. You also don't remember what color it was, right?
I thought it was silver, but I have a big, yeah, I'm sorry, it was kind of, it was also hectic.
Thank you. I've got no further questions.
Redirect.
No questions, Your Honor.
Questions from the jury? May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Okay, ma'am, there is a sequestration order, so that means you can't discuss any portions of your testimony with any other witnesses, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You may be excused. And is the prosecution calling any other witnesses today?
People have no further witnesses, Your Honor. People are arrested this time.
Okay, it's a good time to take a break, and so a couple of things. You all need to go downstairs to Treasury, and then we'll see if administration has refreshment for you, and then we'll come back to see if the defense is calling any witnesses. So we'll be at recess for about 15 minutes. All rise for the jury. Okay, very good. You can be seated. Still working? It's still working?
Yes.
Okay, very good, because those things give us big problems. You wouldn't know how many times you gotta get fixed. Okay,
Those
very,
weird things.
very good. Okay, and so prosecution is rested. Is the defense calling any witnesses today?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the people would like, I'm sorry, the defense would like to call Felicia Stevenson.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under the penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you. You can have a seat. There's a couple of rules. There is a microphone that's in front of you, and the lady behind you is the court recorder, so she has to make a record of everything being stated here today. So your responses must be loud and clear, okay?
Okay.
They also must be verbal. You're doing a good job. You can't just do a head nod or a shake. You have to say yes or no, okay?
Yes.
If there is an objection made by one of the attorneys, you will stop speaking. I'll make a ruling on that objection, and then I'll tell you if you can give that answer or not, okay?
Okay.
Spell your first and last names and say both of them.
Felicia Stevenson, Felisa Stepenson.
You can proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just gonna kind of jump into it. Do you know the gentleman sitting next to me?
I do.
How do you know him?
He's my boyfriend.
And on June 4th of this year, were you with him that day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was.
And you know what day I'm referring to, the reason that we're
This
here
summer,
today?
yes.
And now my goal is not to embarrass you. But you, at that time, on June 4th, you were on probation at that time, is that right?
Correct.
And you're actually an individual in the sobriety court, is that correct?
Correct.
And doing well now?
Correct. Now, yes,
Back on the 4th, had you been drinking that day?
I had, yes.
Okay, and you've already pled guilty to a probation violation, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And that day, you and Jesse had been in an argument, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recall, or not necessarily what was said, but do you recall what the argument was about?
Yes.
Was it about the fact that you've been drinking?
Yes.
And was your daughter with you?
Yes.
What's your daughter's name?
Kyla.
And did there come a point where you and Kyla left the, I'm sorry, let me back up. Where were the two of you and Jesse that day when you were having the argument?
When we were having an argument was on the phone, over the phone.
Was there a point where you actually came over and the two of you were together arguing?
No.
No? Okay. And was Kyla at home with Jesse at that time?
Yes.
And was she overhearing the argument?
Yes.
Did you and Jesse talk, or let me back up. Did there come a time where you came and picked up Kyla?
Yes.
Did you tell Jesse you were picking up Kyla?
No, I didn't.
And when you picked up Kyla, where did you go?
With her after?
Yeah, I'm sorry, with her.
I took her to meet her dad, to have her go to her dad's house.
And her dad is,
William. Rayborn.
did you drive Kyla?
No,
Who drove?
my friend Aaron,
Was there anyone else with you aside from Aaron and Kyla?
her boyfriend, yes.
Where did you drop off Kyla?
It was the QD on Kavanaugh in Pennsylvania.
Why didn't you just take Kyla to William's house?
Because he was already en route. She had called him, and so he was already on his way to pick her up from my house. So we just met in the middle, basically.
Okay. And did you tell, after dropping off Kyla, did you call Jesse? that was too vague. Did you, after dropping off Kyla, did you tell Jesse where Kyla was?
No,
You have to talk to William, I assume, because the two of you share Kyla, correct?
correct,
Did he recently text you regarding this trial?
yes.
What did he text you about?
I'm gonna object at this point, Your Honor, it's the hearsay as to what he texted about. It's not-
I'm sorry, this was already placed on the record earlier. I'm just confirming that what William said at this point, so it's nothing new that the jury hasn't already heard, Your Honor, regarding the text message.
Agree. Your witness did already touch on this during his previous testimony, so the objection's over.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, what did William text you about?
He told me that if he asked me how I was going to, how I can be called as a to testify, if I wasn't there, and that I can't commit perjury. Perjury is a crime.
How did you take that when he said that?
Honestly, it's like he's an idiot.
Okay. Did you see it as threatening you or something?
Kind of, yeah, yeah.
He's
I was
trying
more
to figure, oh,
confused.
sorry.
I was
He's,
just more confused.
okay. Is he's trying to, what, control the situation, figure out what you're gonna say?
Basically, yes.
I'm gonna object to that, Your Honor. It's a speculation as to why the text message was sent.
One response to the objection.
So I thought I was just asking how she felt about it, her interpretation of that was my, I believe is how I phrased that.
Found it more reading and
Okay.
speculation, but that wasn't the objection.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
I have no further questions. That's it.
Cross-examination.
Read. Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
On the date in question, did you also have a conversation on the phone with a Miss Kimberly Martin?
I did.
Okay, and why did you have, why were you on the, what was that conversation in reference to?
She told me that Jesse was over there.
Here I do have to object. This is hearsay.
You want to respond to the objection?
And I would object, Your Honor, that this has already come out in testimony from the people's final witness, Miss Kimberly Martin, that she had phoned this particular individual. But I also was not asking what was said during that, just what the conversation was about, Your Honor.
Okay, repeat your question.
My question was just what why she was called by Miss Martin that day. Why they were having that phone conversation that day.
Yes, why did she have that conversation, or did she have a phone conversation?
I first asked, did she have a phone conversation? She said yes.
Okay,
And I asked why, or what was that conversation about?
well, how would she not respond with hearsay to that question?
She can, I believe she can testify as to what the conversation was about without saying what anybody said, Your Honor.
As with the objection to hearsay, the objection is sustained. You may not answer that question.
No other questions at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
I'll take your.
Any questions from the jury? Okay, and this witness may be excused.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a sequestration order, so that means you can't discuss any portion of your testimony with any other witnesses, okay?
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. Any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Jesse Cockrum to the stand.
You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury? Thank you. You can have a seat. Mr. Milks, did you want to voir dire your client about his rights, or did you want the court to do it?
If I can do that. Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
So you understand you do have the Fifth Amendment right not to say anything at trial, correct? And you understand that you're going to be subjecting yourself not only to my direct exam, but also the prosecutor's cross-examination. Is that right? And obviously the jury here is going to evaluate you and your statements here. You all understand all of that as well, correct? Knowing all of that, have you had an opportunity to talk to me regarding your Fifth Amendment right?
I have.
And knowing all of that, are you waiving your Fifth Amendment right and decide to take the stand and testify in your own defense?
I am waiting.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jesse, first of all, can you spell your first and last name and say them for the record?
Jesse Cockrum, JESSECKRUM.
Now, going back to June 4th, you remember that day? And we'll kind of just jump right into it. Do you remember, I'm sorry, you've been sitting here throughout this entire trial, right?
Yes.
And you recall Ms. Stevenson got up and said the two of you had been having an argument that day, is that right?
It's not exactly how it started, but that was part of the whole situation, yes.
Well, what led up to the two of you having that argument?
When we woke up, she had started blowing dirty for her breathalyzer from the night before.
And I'm sorry, when you say blowing dirty, what do you mean?
For her alcohol, her breathalyzer, because she was on probation for a crime.
Does that mean testing positive for alcohol?
Yes.
Okay.
So she blew dirty for about 2 hours. We really didn't have an argument. So I left and I went to help a friend tear down the rest of his whole lot. When I came,
No, okay, so then what happened? Did you come home eventually?
I came home about 3 o'clock, like I think when Rayborn said, yes.
And when you got home, who was there?
Kyla and myself.
Did there come a point where you talked to Felicia?
On the telephone, we did yell back and forth.
Fair to say there was an argument?
Yes.
After the argument, what did you do?
During the argument, I went and knocked on, prior to the argument, I went and knocked on Kyla's door. And I said, Kyla, where's your money? She said, go and get me food. So I started to call Felicia, and Felicia didn't answer. And I knew she had been blowing dirty, so I suspected the worst.
Okay. After that, and that was before you called Felicia?
Before I called Felicia,
So after you called Felicia, what did you do after the telephone conversation with her?
I actually went back to Kyla's room before the telephone conversation ended. And I said to Kyla, I think it's best that you call your father, so you're not here when your mother gets home.
To your knowledge, if you know, did she do that?
She did.
What did you do after that conversation with Kyla?
I went to making some food.
And did there come a point later where Felicia came over?
She did.
Did you see her come into the house?
She stopped in the middle of the street in her vehicle.
Did you see her stop in the middle of the street?
Only because out of the corner of my eye, I seen Kyla leaving while I was cooking
When you said Kyla was leaving, where did she go?
out to the street to go into the vehicle to leave. After I said, I said to her, I think it's best you call your father. Unbeknownst to me, her mother was coming to dinner, and her mother was drunk.
Was her mother, and again, Felicia's her mother, correct?
Correct.
Was Felicia driving?
She was.
Was there anyone else in the car with her at that time?
Her friend Amy.
Were you there at the drop-off with William and,
I was not.
so what did you do after seeing Felicia leave?
I got pissed
Why is that?
because
She was drunk and she had a kid with her and she had two people of some questionable stature.
We don't know, we know you eventually drove out to Williams, correct?
I did.
Why didn't you just call William?
I never had Williams phone in the 3 years that I've distantly known him.
Well, there came a point where you did end up driving to Williams, is that right?
I did.
Okay. First, what kind of car do you drive?
2016 Black Camaro.
And did you take that vehicle
I did.
to Williams? What happened? What happens when you got to Williams? What did you do?
I pulled in the driveway.
And did you see anyone outside at that time?
His backyard has an elevated porch. And he has a fence in front of the elevated porch. And there were people standing on the elevated porch. And I yelled from the car window, "Hey, is Will here?"
Your Honor, may I approach?
Okay.
So I'm handing you Defense Exhibit B here. Looking at this photo, this is a picture of the front of the house as if I'm standing on the street, correct?
Yes.
To the right of that, is that the privacy fence you're talking about?
Yes.
And behind that is where the pool is that what you're saying?
There is a pool there, and on the back corner is an elevated porch.
Okay.
And the people that I was speaking to saying, "Hey, is Will here?" was on that elevated porch. And I was over here completely in his driveway, all the way past the sidewalk.
Okay.
And it was good.
Thank you. Did someone eventually come out of the house?
I think Will was the first to come out.
And back up a little bit. Why did you go to Williams?
Because his daughter was with her mother, who was drunk, violating probation, and two other people who are very questionable character.
When you began speaking to, or did you and Williams have a conversation?
I started off by saying something like, "Can you believe this shit?"
Referring to,
Felicia.
what was your concern at that time?
His child.
Did you know where his child was when you arrived at the house?
I had no idea.
Did William tell you where she was?
Within a couple of seconds, he said, "Yeah, I have her here." Not exactly in those words. I've never mind.
How did William react when you told him why you were there?
Immediately, William was abrasive. He was hostile. He was combative, even before I spoke.
And you're saying combative and hostile. Was he loud necessarily?
His physical demeanor.
Can you help me understand, what do you mean by his physical demeanor?
His stature was tense, and you could tell, I could tell he was annoyed.
What was he wearing at that time?
I think he was
Objection
shirtless.
relevance, Your Honor.
Excuse me?
Objection relevance. I
As
don't
to
know.
what he was wearing?
Yeah,
What's the relevance?
I'm just trying to paint the picture. These are res gesti facts at this point. I'm just, like I said, just trying to paint the picture for the jury so they can understand everything. Like I said, this is in the middle of this argument and what's going on. My client's talking about physical stature. Was there anything else bolstering that physical stature? Is essentially where this is going to.
You wanna know what his outfit was?
Maybe approach, Your Honor.
Yes. I'll allow the question. You can answer.
All right, sir.
Objection is overruled.
So what was he wearing at this time?
So if I can testify as to what William, Kim, and Rayborn already said,
No. What was he wearing when the two of you were having an argument?
They were very comfortable.
Okay,
He was in a pair of red swimming shorts and he did not have a shirt.
and was this part of kind of his stature at that point? How he was presenting himself to you?
Well, he presented himself kind of like a peacock. You know what I mean?
Kind of.
Puffed up,
Okay.
chest out, what?
And so is that what you interpret as confrontation?
Yeah.
Okay. If you know about how long had you and William had this argument, or how long were the two of you kind of going back and
It
forth?
was 2 to 3 minutes tops.
At the conclusion, I'm sorry, before you ended up leaving, did anyone else come outside?
And his sisters both ended up making their way out.
All right, so let's kind of just get to it at this point. What happened after the argument?
I did attempt to leave.
What do you mean attempted to leave?
I pulled completely out of the driveway.
Okay.
And I ended up parallel with his house in the street. And I did start to pull forward.
After you pulled forward, in fact, let me come back to defense exhibit C. Sir, I'm handing you defense exhibit. May I approach your honor?
Sure.
Thank you. Defense exhibit C. You'll see a silver car in the street there. Was that car there when you were there?
That car was there.
Okay. Take this back then. And you said that you pulled forward. Where did you pull forward to?
Not only was that car there on oncoming traffic side, there was another car in traffic side facing the direction that I was parallel, that I would be pulling out. So I pulled out close to the curb that was closest to William Rayborn's house.
Your Honor, if it would be okay, could I have my client kind of draw the scene only for demonstrative purposes underneath?
Sure.
Thing? So if you wouldn't mind stepping around here, I've got a dry erase marker. Just to kind of set this up. There's the driveway. Where, I'll give you this. Now, where did you, we know you were parked on the driveway. You backed up. Which way did you back up? Oh, let's
So-
say the silver car is right
So
here.
this would be Will's house, right?
Okay.
William Rayborn's house, right here.
Right,
And I was in the driveway, never,
okay.
because there was no cars. There were actually cars closer. And the driveway is so deep that I was able to pull in and be the only car, nothing on the side. That silver car was right here,
Can you mark an S on that for the silver car?
the silver car.
Thank you.
Silver
Now,
car.
when you backed out, which way did you go?
There was another vehicle, like I
Oh.
said, right here on the other side of the car.
Okay.
On the other side of William Rayborn's house, directly in front.
Okay.
So when I backed out close to this curb.
Okay,
And then when I
and let me just back up. When you're saying the curb, you mean the curb in front of,
closest to
okay.
William Rayborn's house, correct?
and then what happened after you backed up?
And then when I went to leave, I went like that on an angle to get back to this side of the traffic that the other vehicle was on.
And once you moved to the other side of traffic, did you leave?
I stopped
Why'd you stop?
because I'm an idiot.
Okay, can you elaborate, please?
Because like him, I wanted to be the biggest peacock on the plate. And I wanted to get my 2 cents in before I left.
Okay. You realize that was stupid?
That was the stupidest mistake I made that day.
Okay. Did you end up backing up?
And get back up.
Where did you back up to?
I backed up to the same spot that I was in when I backed out of his driveway.
Did you drive onto the lawn?
I was nowhere near his lawn, which would be right there, or right there. Did not back into his driveway at all. Did not swap the tires at all. Reversing, did not hit the brakes in his driveway from attempting to hit him. Did not hit the gas.
Did you intend to hit
I
anyone?
had no intention to hit. The
Was
only
it your
reason I-
intent to scare anyone?
It was not my intent to scare anyone,
Why did you back up then? And I know you already said, well, why did you back up?
because I wanted to get my 2 cents in.
All right, so you had a few more comments that you wanted to make?
No, I just wanted to look at him
Okay.
Like, he was an idiot too.
Okay. What happened after that?
I left.
And where did you go to? All right, I'm gonna have you sit back down then.
I went back home.
Okay. Did you ever end up calling 911 that day?
I did. Immediately upon leaving,
And why would you have called 911?
because that was the first time when I left that I actually talked to Felicia, because she had just hung up the phone with Kim.
Well, why would you need to call 911 just because of that?
Because Felicia was talking about her meds and how unhappy she was and how she felt. And it wasn't in a good place.
Was it suicidal ideations or anything?
Yes,
Would you have called police if you just tried to run someone over with your car?
Is that a, oh,
I wasn't that stupid that day.
All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Professor Sam?
Just briefly. Good afternoon, Mr. Cochrum.
Good afternoon.
So you said that earlier that day, Ms. Stevenson had been blowing positive for alcohol, correct?
Yes,
But eventually that had stopped.
about 2 hours after she started.
Okay. Okay. And then you said after she had stopped blowing positive for alcohol, she had left the house, correct?
I left the house before she did.
Or sorry, but she was gone after, she had left after she had stopped blowing positive, correct?
At some point, obviously, yes.
Okay. And then, but yet when you were talking to Kyla, and Leslie, I believe you said when Kyla left, you said that Felicia was drunk.
Yes,
Did you know that for a fact?
yes,
But I thought had you spoken to Felicia between when she had left and when Kyla got into her car?
yes. On the phone when we were arguing.
And you could tell she was drunk.
I knew she was drunk and she told me she was drunk.
Okay. And then you also said that you saw.
And not only was she,
Sir,
she was blowing positive.
So after that, you said that when Felicia allegedly came to, or when she came to pick up Kyla, you said you just saw it out of the corner of your eye when Kyla was leaving.
Yes,
Okay. Could you tell then for certain that Felicia was the one driving?
when I turned around from the stove and looked directly out the window that faces the street, and Felicia was in the driver's seat of the vehicle in front of that window, all in the same line of sight, I knew that Felicia was driving.
And so where was, you said that there was an individual named Aaron in the car as well.
Aaron Lundy,
Okay, and where was she sitting?
she was in the passenger seat.
Okay, and so when Felicia pulled up, which side of the car was facing the window?
The driver's side, and she was facing Martin Luther King.
All right. And you stated that when you went over to William Rayborn's house, that you never, he was, I guess, initially, you described him as aggressive, correct?
Yes.
And did you ever exit your vehicle at this time?
No,
Okay. So were you ever in, I guess, fear of Mr. Rayborn, or?
we were both pissed off
Okay.
for different reasons.
All right. And did you spit on Mr. Rayborn at all?
No.
Oh. And it's your testimony that when you backed up out of the driveway, that you stayed completely in the road after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason I stopped was
Sir,
because,
I'm not at objection, not responsible, Your Honor.
sorry,
Question.
objection system.
No other questions at this time. Your Honor.
Did you ever exit your vehicle?
no, no.
Okay, you redirect.
Just one, Your Honor. Just to clarify. Prosecutor was asking you regarding Felicia stopped blowing positive. Does that mean she stopped testing
That means, so when her breathalyzer, when she has to wake up and when she was on her breathalyzer and she'd have to wake up and she'd start blowing, the first blow you stop. But once you blow dirty for the first time, you have to blow every 15 minutes until you blow clean. And she blew positive for about a 2-hour span.
And was there a point where she actually tested clean then?
No,
Okay,
because she disappeared for 3 days and didn't test again until
so just for clarification, so her last test was still positive, is that right?
that is correct.
And then she stopped testing, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any questions from the jury? No questions? Okay, may he be excused from the stand?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cochrum. You may be excused.
Thank you.
Is the defense calling any other witnesses today?
This time the defense will rest, Your Honor, thank you.
Any rebuttal witnesses?
No rebuttal witnesses, Your Honor.
Okay, we will have a recess so we can go over some final instructions and then you can come back and they'll proceed with their final statements and closing arguments. You can all rise for the jury. Bring the jury back. Did you want to tell your witnesses that they can come? They're sitting there.
All rise.
Okay, you can be seated. It's testing, it's still working? Still working? Very good. You can proceed with your closing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. So if you recall, when I did my opening statement, I asked you to remember the elements of the crime of assault, use that sort of as a checklist. And I would ask you here now to apply that checklist and to those elements. Today, we heard testimony from 3 witnesses, Mr. William Rayborn, Miss April Rayborn, and Miss Kimberly Martin. We heard that on June 4th, 2023, they were at a family gathering at 1115 White Street in the city of Lansing in Ingham County. That during this family gathering, the defendant, Jesse Cockrum, showed up in his vehicle, pulled into the driveway, had an altercation with Mr. Rayborn, and eventually Miss April Rayborn came outside as well. That after a short altercation, Mr. Cockrum then backed his vehicle out of the driveway, pulled forward a short bit, and then backed up and attempted to hit Mr. Rayborn or Miss April Rayborn with his vehicle. And I want you, when you're back there deliberating, to focus on the evidence here that was presented today in the testimony of the witnesses. I want you to focus on the fact that we had 3 witnesses, Mr. William Rayborn, Miss April Rayborn, and Miss Kimberly Martin, who all testified that there was an argument, that the defendant backed out of the driveway after the argument had concluded, and then he proceeded to reverse onto the lawn, and that Mr. William Rayborn had to be pulled out of the way by his sister April to avoid being hit by that vehicle. We also heard testimony from Mr. Cockrum himself, who testified that he didn't leave immediately. He backed up because he wanted to get his point across. We also heard a lot of testimony today about what happened prior to this and the relationship between these individuals. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today for the crime of assault. The crime of assault has 3 elements. One, that the defendant either attempted to commit a battery or did an act that would cause a reasonable person to fear or apprehend an immediate battery. A battery being defined as a forceful, violent, or offensive touching of a person or something closely related to that person. Second, that the defendant intended to either commit that battery or to make a reasonable person fear an immediate battery. And third, that at the time the defendant had the ability to commit that battery. I would argue, based on the testimony presented here today by the witnesses, that the defendant, Mr. Jesse Cockrum, intended to make a reasonable person, Mr. William Rayborn, fear an immediate battery when he drove his car backwards onto the lawn of Mr. Rayborn's residence, that he intended, he intended to make Mr. Rayborn fear an immediate battery, and that being in his vehicle, he definitely had the ability to commit an immediate battery. As we've stated before prior to this, it's up to you to determine the credibility of the witnesses here and the credibility of the evidence presented. I would urge you to look at the evidence that was presented and the similarities in the stories of William Rayborn, April Rayborn, and Kimberly Martin. Yes, there were some differences, but this incident was also 6 months ago, and people's memories tend to have issues after 6 months. With that, I would ask you to come back with a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Mr. Meltz.
Thank you. Would you be okay if I?
Absolutely.
Thank you. From the outset, everyone here knew that this case is about reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt of whether the prosecutor can meet that burden. Are you so convinced that a crime had occurred that you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt? That means more than a reasonable doubt. You can have one reasonable doubt, and that's not going to be enough. It's got to be beyond that reasonable doubt. When we started this case, I brought up the idea of confirmation bias, believing what you want to believe. And we also talked about how messy families can be sometimes, and I think that's a fair statement. Now, the prosecutor indicated that, look, this isn't about the families, it's just about whether or not there was an assault and battery, but this is very much about that. It was the genesis of the fight, beginning of the arguments. And it's what led to this confrontation between William and Jesse, my client. And it's a very important thing to look into because it is sort of, again, the genesis of the confirmation bias, believing what people want to believe. As people get tempers flared, and a lot was going on, and there was some yelling or at least some puffing going on that day. And then what did people actually see? I want to jump into this here, but I think the prosecutor actually may have said it best that the witnesses' statements were different and that tends to have issues. That tends to have issues. So the prosecutor himself is saying that there's issues here. That's a reasonable doubt. I think even the prosecutors might say it's harboring some reasonable doubt about what actually happened. Let's start with uncontroverted evidence. What do we know for certain that no one seemed to disagree with here? Well, we know that Felicia Stevenson, who got up on the stand, and in my opinion was very brave. Not easy to get up there and say that, yes, I have an addiction problem, and I slipped that day. And that's not easy. But she did, and no one seems to deny that fact that she was having some serious problems that day. Because of some of those problems, she was having an argument with my client. And eventually Kyla was picked up by her father, and they met out at the quality dairy at that point. Or even William said, yeah, it seemed like she had been drinking that day, that she was under the influence, and that she was with some bad people. I believe William said something along the lines of drug people or drug users or something along those lines. She was in a bad place. And she had her daughter with her. We know that Jesse drove to William's house, again, uncontroverted. And we also know that Jesse was there to tell William or tell people that Felicia had taken Kyla, that they driven away. He didn't know where she was. He was concerned for her. Essentially, why is he going over there? Because he was concerned because of Felicia's state of being and the fact that she had Kyla at the time. He didn't know. Everyone here agrees. He did not know where Kyla was at that time. And so when he went there to try to warn William about what was going on, what's William's response? I don't care. That's not my problem, he said. As he was up here arguing against me, He was saying, not my problem, not my concern. I'm only concerned about my daughter. Your daughter was in the car with some irreputable people. Jesse was there to warn you. Is that what you would want to happen? Is that what you would want? If your child was in the car with some irreputable people, someone to warn you? My client didn't have William's phone number. He couldn't call. So he did the next best thing. He drove there himself. He could have just stayed at home. He could have just waited, not done a thing. Boy, that'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it? But he didn't. Instead, he drove out there. And while he was making this warning, somehow things escalated. And I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, where did this argument begin to escalate? Who was making this argument escalate? Is it the guy saying, hey, look, there's trouble? Or the one who's saying, not my concern, not my concern. No shirt, red shorts, out there puffing his chest, not my problem, not my concern. These are things that are uncontroverted at this point. We also know that my client, Jesse, backed out of the driveway, backed up. Turn, started to go forward, backed up. Why? I don't think anyone's gonna disagree because he said he was an idiot. He said that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. It also takes a lot to get up here in front of a jury who's going to decide your fate and say, yeah, look, this is where my mistake was. This is where I did something stupid. Now, let's talk about what's not the same. And let's talk first about proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I know it's a amorphous term and it can be very difficult, but I always think of it as steps, okay? There's several different, they're called burdens of proof, all right? There's a scintilla of evidence. That's like a hunch. That's way down here. That's almost nothing. You barely have to prove anything, just a hunch. Oh, I heard a rumor. That's a scintilla of evidence. Let's take one step up and we're into reasonable suspicion. This is what police officers need in order to pat an individual down for weapons. Doesn't take much. Is there some concern, some reasonable suspicion, something that's just more than a hunch?
Off the record. Her computer shut down. Was,
No,
I think I can do it.
so you would,
I can go back and play it back.
No, that's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I
That
think I know
sounds
where I'm
good.
at.
very good.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a very long day. I can appreciate that. I can truly appreciate everyone sitting here and having to listen to lawyers drone on, and I greatly appreciate it. I'm just going to back up just a little bit, just regarding the steps. We talked about scintilla, very little. Reasonable suspicion, just a touch higher, needed for a pat down. Then there's something called probable cause. This is more than just a hunch, more than reasonable suspicion. This is where police can actually arrest you, take you in. Obviously not guilty or anything, but this is where police can take you into jail at that point with just probable cause. Moving forward, we then have preponderance of the evidence. Think of this, we're just at 51%. This is most often seen in civil cases. 51%, that's just where we're at right now. Beyond that is then clear and convincing evidence. Clear and convincing evidence is where the state can take away your children. The state has to prove by clear and convincing evidence that you're not going to be a parent. This is where they can take away your children. And what's even beyond that is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Before you can take away a person's liberty, you must have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the absolute highest burden in the land. And so let's go through some of these stories at this point with the idea in mind that this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We had the prosecutor's 3 witnesses. And when looking at the witnesses, this is largely going to be about credibility, isn't it? Because you just have statements. Prosecutor didn't present you any police officers, didn't present to you any photos. It was the defense that provided the photos of the crime scene. Didn't provide any evidence of a ripped up sod. Didn't provide any evidence of tire tracks, a dirty Camaro, something to show that it went through the grass. There's been no evidence to corroborate testimony. As we talked about during voir dire, that was something important to everyone. Was making sure that there'd be something to support statements. We had these several statements regarding my client apparently backing up all the way into the front lawn. And we had 3 different places. We had William, who was, again, fighting with me on the stand about where these things were. He didn't want to answer yes or no, but he was saying that, look, it came to about where he was standing, just before where he was, 8 feet away, just kind of in the middle of the grass. And you will see from the evidence, when you go back and deliberate here, where his X is. In People's Exhibit A here, right in the middle. Right in the middle of the front lawn. Well, and then we had April's testimony. April said that, oh yeah, he backed all the way up to the railing, all the way up to the porch. That's how far back he went. And remember, people are also saying, oh, he was squealing his tires when he was backing up. He was chirping his tires. They were squealing. And it's a big, heavy, powerful car. What would you expect to see if it backed all the way up to the railing of that front porch? But then let's also remember the fact that when April was up here, she had to be reminded about what she told police. That she actually didn't see the car backing up. That someone had to yell, hey, move your ass, get out of the way. But suddenly she comes here today and it's, oh yeah, I saw the whole thing. Back then she said, no, it was something completely different. I didn't see it. And then finally we have Kim. And now Kim's statement was that the car backed up just enough to come over the sidewalk. Back tire, just over the sidewalk, backing all the way up. 3 distinct and different spots. It should not be that difficult considering what these people are alleging at this point. 3 completely different spots. 3 completely different spots that don't have anything to corroborate what the prosecutor is saying at this time. 3 completely different spots. 3 different statements. Is this proof beyond a reasonable doubt? What do you expect to see? What should be there or what isn't there? As you heard Jesse also took the stand and told his story. Brady waved his fist on the right, got up, and wanted to tell everyone what happened. He said that he backed up into the street. He did pull forward and backed up a little bit. You know what makes sense about his statement? In his statement, there wouldn't be any tire marks. There wouldn't be any ripped up sod. That's evidence that should be there and isn't there. But it falls in line with his statement here. And so I'm asking you, with these competing stories, even if you think maybe something did happen, maybe it didn't, with these competing stories at this point, are you so convinced that you are convinced beyond a single reasonable doubt? Again, this is the state of Michigan against my client. This isn't William against my client. This isn't Kim. This isn't April against my client. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Has the state come to that? Have they proven that to you? And are you comfortable with that? Making this momentous decision? Because I'll tell you what, as long as you have been here, and it has been extraordinarily long and understand difficult, this is a day my client will never forget. This is the day my client will remember when 6 individuals had his fate in their hands to determine whether or not the state has proven this case. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I cannot thank you enough for being here, taking time out of your day. And thank you. I ask that you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Any re-argument?
Yes, just briefly. So, defense in their closing made mention, particularly at the end, of the differences in the story of the witnesses from the prosecution. However, I would also urge you to remember that there were also inconsistencies with the testimony of the defense witnesses. Both Ms. Stevenson was presented by the defense, and Mr. Rayborn testified that when Mr. Rayborn picked up his daughter from Ms. Stevenson, that her friend was driving. She was not. Yet, when Mr. Cockrum testified, he testified that he could clearly see Ms. Stevenson driving the vehicle. Ladies and gentlemen, we have here, as Mr. Milks was saying, statements that largely coincide between Mr. Cockrum and the 3 prosecution witnesses. Really what this case and what you will have to decide is, did Mr. Cockrum, instead of just backing up into the street as he claims, drive his car onto the lawn? Mr. Milks said there was no pictures of tire marks. However, in one of the exhibits he presented, he asked, I think it was the witness April Rayborn, if she saw tire marks in the front yard, and she said she did. As he said, this ultimately comes down to credibility. But I believe, and I would ask that when you go back and you weigh the credibility of these witnesses and this evidence, that you come back with a verdict of guilt. Thank you.
Okay, if you could fix your attention to the screen one last time, I'll go over some final instructions. Members of the jury, the evidence and arguments in this case are finished, and I will now instruct you on the law as it applies in this case. Remember that you have taken an oath to return a true and just verdict based only on the evidence and my instructions on the law. You must not let sympathy or prejudice influence your decision. As jurors, you must decide what the facts of this case are. This is your job and no one else's. You must think about all the evidence and then decide what each piece of evidence means and how important you think it is. This includes whether you believe what each of the witnesses said. What you decide about any fact in this case is final. It is my duty to instruct you on the law. You must take the law as I give it to you. If a lawyer says something different about the law, follow what I say. At various times, I have already given you some instructions about the law. You must take all my instructions together as the law you are to follow. You should not pay attention to some instructions and ignore others. To sum up, it is your job to decide what the facts of the case are, to apply the law as I give it to you, and in that way decide the case. A person accused of a crime is presumed to be innocent. This means that you must start with the presumption that the defendant is innocent. This presumption continues throughout the trial and entitles the defendant to a verdict of not guilty unless you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. Every crime is made up of parts called elements. The prosecutor must prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant is not required to prove his innocence or to do anything. If you find that the prosecutor has not proved every element beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find the defendant not guilty. A reasonable doubt is a fair, honest doubt growing out of the evidence or lack of evidence. It is not merely an imaginary or possible doubt, but a doubt based on reason and common sense. A reasonable doubt is just that, a doubt that is reasonable after a careful and considered examination of the facts and circumstances of this case. When you discuss the case and decide on your verdict, you may only consider the evidence that has been properly admitted in this case. Therefore, it is important for you to understand what is evidence and what is not evidence. Evidence include only the sworn testimony of witnesses, the exhibits admitted into evidence, and anything else I have told you to consider as evidence. Many things are not evidence, and you must be careful not to consider them as such. The fact that the defendant is charged with the crime and is on trial is not evidence. The lawyer's statements and arguments are not evidence. They are only meant to help you understand the evidence in each side's legal theories. You should only accept things the lawyer says that are supported by the evidence or by your own common sense and general knowledge. The lawyer's questions to the witnesses and my question to the witnesses are also not evidence. You should consider these questions only as they give meaning to the witnesses' answers. My comments, rulings, questions, and instructions are also not evidence. It is my duty to see that the trial is conducted according to the law and to tell you the law that applies in this case. However, when I make a comment or give an instruction, I am not trying to influence your vote or express a personal opinion about the case. If you believe that I have an opinion about how you decide the case, you must pay no attention to that opinion. You are the only judges of the facts, and you should decide this case from the evidence. At times during the trial, I have excluded evidence that was offered or stricken testimony that was heard. Do not consider those things in deciding this case. Make your decision only on the evidence that I let in and nothing else. Your decision should be based on all the evidence, regardless of which party produced it. You should use your own common sense and general knowledge in weighing and judging the evidence, but you should not use any personal knowledge you may have about a place, person, or event. To repeat once more, you must decide this case based only on the evidence admitted during the trial. As I said before, it is your job to decide what the facts of this case are. You must decide which witnesses you believe and how important you think their testimony is. You do not have to accept or reject everything a witness said. You are free to believe all, none, or part of any person's testimony. In deciding which testimony you believe, you should rely on your own common sense and everyday experience. However, in deciding whether you believe a witness's testimony, you must set aside any bias or prejudice you may have based on race, gender, or national origin of the witness. There is no fixed set of rules for judging whether you believe a witness, but it may help you to think about these questions. Was the witness able to see or hear clearly? How long was the witness watching or listening? Was anything else going on that might distract the witness? Does the witness seem to have a good memory? How did the witness look and act while testifying? Did the witness seem to be making an honest effort to tell the truth, or did the witness seem to evade the questions or argue with the lawyers? Does the witness's age or maturity affect how you judge his or her testimony? Does the witness have any bias, prejudice, or personal interest in how this case is decided? Have there been any promises, threats, suggestions, or other influences that affected how the witness testified? In general, does the witness have any special reason to tell the truth or any special reason to lie? All in all, how reasonable does the witness's testimony seem when you think about the other evidence in the case? Sometimes the testimony of different witnesses will not agree, and you must decide which testimony you accept. You should think about whether the disagreement involves something important or not, and whether you think someone is lying or simply mistaken. People see and hear things differently, and witnesses may testify honestly, but simply be wrong about what they thought they saw or remembered. It is also a good idea to think about which testimony agrees best with the other evidence in the case. However, you may conclude that a witness deliberately lied about something that is important to how you decide this case. If so, you may choose not to accept anything that witness said. On the other hand, if you think the witness lied about some things but told the truth about others, you may simply accept the part you think is true and ignore the rest. The prosecutor must also prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime occurred on or about June 4th, 2023 within the city of Lansing in Ingham County. When you go to the jury room, you may take a written copy of the jury instructions along with your notes. You should first choose a foreperson. The foreperson should see to it that the discussions are carried out in a business-like way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. During the deliberations, please turn off your cell phones or other communication equipment until we recess. A verdict in a criminal case must be unanimous. In order to return a verdict, it is necessary that each of you agrees on that verdict. In the jury room, you will discuss the case among yourselves, but ultimately each of you will have to make up your own mind. Any verdict must represent the individual considered judgment of each juror. As you discuss the case, you should think about all my instructions together as the law that you are to follow. It is your duty as jurors to talk to each other and to make every reasonable effort to reach an agreement. Express your opinions and the reasons for them, but keep an open mind as you listen to your fellow jurors. Rethink your opinions and do not hesitate to change your mind if you decide that you were wrong. Try your best to work out your differences. However, although you should try to reach an agreement, none of you should give up your honest opinion about the case just because other jurors disagree with you or just for the sake of reaching a verdict. In the end, your vote must be your own and you must vote honestly and in good conscience. Possible penalty should not influence your decision. It is the duty of the judge to fix the penalty within the limits provided by law. If you want to communicate with me while you're in the jury room, please have your foreperson write a note and give it to the court officer. It is not proper for you to talk directly with the judges, lawyers, court officers, or other people involved in the case. As you discuss the case, you must not let anyone, even me, know how your voting stands. Therefore, until you return with a unanimous verdict, do not reveal this to anyone outside the jury room. When you go to the jury room to deliberate, you may take your notes and again, the full instructions. If you want to look at any of the reference documents or exhibits that have been admitted, just ask for them. I'm going to send them back there with you so you won't have to ask for them. When you go to the jury room, you will be given a written copy of the instructions that you have just heard. As you discuss the case, you should think about all of my instructions together as the law that you are to follow. You may return a verdict of guilty of the alleged crime or not guilty. I have prepared a verdict form listing the possible verdicts. Facts can be proven by direct evidence from a witness or an exhibit. Direct evidence is evidence about what we actually see or hear. For example, If you look outside and see rain falling, that is direct evidence that it is raining. Facts can also be proved by indirect or circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence that normally or reasonably lead to other facts. So taking that same example, if you see a person coming from outside wearing a raincoat covered with small drops of water, that would be circumstantial evidence that it is raining. You may consider circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence by itself or a combination of circumstantial evidence and direct evidence can be used to prove the elements of the crime. In other words, you should consider all evidence that you believe. When the lawyers agree on a statement of facts, these are called stipulated facts. You may regard such stipulated facts as true, but you are not required to do so. The defendant's intent may be proved by what he said, what he did, how he did it, or by any other facts or circumstances and evidence. You should not decide this case based on which side presented more witnesses. Instead, you should think about each witness and each piece of evidence and whether you believe them. Then you must decide whether the testimony and evidence you believe proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The elements of the crime again. The defendant is charged with the crime of assault, where there has been no battery. The defendant is charged with the crime of assault, and to prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant either attempted to commit a battery upon a William Rayborn and or an April Rayborn, or did an act that would cause a reasonable person to fear or apprehend an immediate battery. A battery is a forceful, violent, or offensive touching of the person or something closely connected with the person of another. Second, that the defendant intended either to commit a battery upon William Rayborn and or April Rayborn, or to make William Rayborn and or April Rayborn reasonably fear an immediate battery. An assault cannot happen by accident. Third, that at the time the defendant had the ability to commit a battery, appeared to have the ability, or thought he had the ability. And that concludes my instructions. And at this time, one of you all is going to be grossly disappointed that you have to go home and you can't deliberate. Juror number 3, we thank you for your service. You may be excused. Your stuff is in the jury room. Okay, we'll get you in there and you can be on your way. The rest of you are going to be released at this point. You are free to begin deliberation, but you must first pick your foreperson. We will give you a copy of our instructions. Again, if you have any questions, you have your foreperson write that question down and give it to the court officer, who at this time, Mr. Wornsley. I assume it will be Mr. Wornsley throughout the end of the evening, but that could change. Whoever the court officer is, he will be right outside the door. You just knock on that door and you can get that question to him, and make sure that you don't let me or anyone else know how you're leaning during that time. I'm going to send the 3 exhibits, I think it was, back with the jury instructions. Who has the exhibits? Up there on the witness stand. Very good. Okay, Mr. Wornsley, can I swear you in?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that you will, to the utmost of your ability, keep the persons sworn as jurors on this trial from separating from each other, that you will not suffer any communication to be made to them or any of them orally or otherwise until the time that they have reached a verdict?
I do.
Thank you. All rise for the jury. You can be excused.
Should I get this?
You can give Mr. Wornsley. Okay, and we are in recess until the time that we either have a question and or a verdict. So don't go far because there could be a question. I signed this, I'm sorry. Okay, you can be seated. It's all working?
Yes.
Okay, very good. As on the record, and my understanding is that you've come to a verdict already? Okay, are you the foreperson?
Yes.
Okay, can you stand? And read your verdict?
Say what we chose.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Not guilty.
And did you want the jury poll?
No, thank you. Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for your service today, and for your efficiency, for your attentiveness, for the great questions that you asked. And our justice system will not be complete without your being here. Now, typically, you may want to stay behind and have discussion with either of the attorneys. That's completely up to you. You do not have to do that. You are free to leave, okay? Thank you again. All rise for the jury. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, sir. You can be seated. Okay, so that's a not guilty by way of acquittal. If you stay seated for just a moment, we'll get you that paperwork and you'll be free to go. Okay, sir?
Thank you.
Any additional matters for today's record?
Nothing from the people, Your Honor.
Come from the phone.
Thank you. You're all set. And he asked him to give us